How do you succeed a prophet? How do you take the throne left by an icon who distorted reality itself with his force of will? Many predicted collapse, the loss of magic. But what happened was the opposite. The empire became richer, more powerful, and in a frightening way, more cohesive. In today's video, here at The Truth, Dark Psychology, we will analyze the mind behind this feat. Not the explosive and charismatic mind of a showman, but the silent, methodical, and terrifyingly effective mind of an operator. We are going to deconstruct Tim Cook's machine of loyalty and control. If you want to understand the most subtle and powerful forms of influence, subscribe, like the video, and prepare to see how the strongest control is the one you can barely perceive. When Tim Cook took command of Apple, the world expected a new Steve Jobs, but found his complete opposite. In place of volcanic fury and messianic charisma, there emerged a man of soft speech, a calm presence, and an almost indecipherable quietness. Many mistook this for weakness, a power vacuum, but that is a superficial reading. In truth, Cook's calmness is an immensely powerful psychological tool of control. In a high-pressure environment, the one who remains calm is the one who holds the power. His tranquility forces everyone around him to become more reactive and anxious, searching his impassive face for any sign of approval or disapproval. This silent approach is a form of passive manipulation. Unlike Jobs, who imposed his reality through overwhelming force, Cook allows others to fill the silence with their own insecurities and projections. In a meeting, he is known for listening for long periods without saying a word, letting executives talk until they sometimes contradict themselves or reveal the weaknesses in their own arguments. When he finally speaks with few words and in a measured tone, his decision seems not an act of passion, but a logical and non-negotiable conclusion, which makes resisting it almost impossible. This methodical and silent style creates an environment of controlled predictability. Under Jobs, Apple lived in a state of creative chaos and constant fear. Under Cook, the company operates like a Swiss watch, precise and efficient. This cultural shift, from a volcano to a glacier, is no less controlling. It just trades the acute fear of an explosion for the constant, crushing pressure of ice. Employees no longer fear a fit of rage, but rather the risk of being seen as a faulty gear in the perfect machine Cook has built. The anomaly, the inefficiency, becomes the new cardinal sin. Cook's quietness also lends him an air of moral and intellectual authority. He doesn't need to raise his voice because his position and his track record speak for him. He's the man Jobs trusted to carry on his legacy. This borrowed authority, combined with his own unquestionable competence in operations, creates an aura of infallibility. To question Tim Cook is not just to disagree with a CEO. It is to question logic, efficiency, and in a way, the final will of the founder himself. It is a subtle but extremely difficult psychological barrier for anyone within the organization to cross. The psychological lesson here is about the power of passive control. Loud and dominant leadership is easy to identify and therefore to resist. Silent, analytical, and patient leadership, however, can be far more insidious. It creates an environment where conformity is seen as rationality and loyalty is a natural consequence of efficiency. Cook teaches us that you don't need to shout to have absolute control. Sometimes, silence and a sharp question at the right moment are the most effective weapons of all. Tim Cook's true dark genius lies not in product design, but in system design. His background is in operations and supply chain, and it is through this lens that he has redesigned the psychology of Apple. He has built a machine where loyalty is not primarily a feeling, but an operational requirement. Every division, every supplier, every employee is a perfectly adjusted gear in a vast global machine. Their function is so interdependent on the others that any deviation, any failure to do their part, threatens the collapse of the entire system. Loyalty, in this context, is simply the perfect execution of one's task. This interdependence creates a powerful form of social control. It is no longer the charismatic leader who demands your loyalty. It is the system itself. Your colleagues depend on you. The next stage of production depends on you. The global product launch depends on you. To fail is not just to disappoint the boss. It is to disappoint the entire organization. This brilliantly engineered peer pressure is far more effective than any direct order. It internalizes the need for conformity and turns the employees themselves into the guardians of efficiency and mutual loyalty. By obsessively focusing on supply chain optimization, Cook achieved something remarkable. He removed friction, and with it, the opportunity for divergent thinking. In a system so optimized for speed and efficiency, there is no time or space for what if. The machine is designed to execute a vision, not to question it. Creativity is still valued, but only within the strict parameters set by the leadership. Any innovation that threatens the operational efficiency of the machine is naturally seen as a virus to be eliminated. Ensuring that control remains centralized, this operational loyalty extends outside the company, trapping suppliers in a web of dependency. Apple is such a large and demanding client that it forces its partners to build entire factories and shape their production processes around its needs. Once inside Apple's ecosystem, it is almost impossible to leave. The financial dependence is total. In this way, Cook ensures a loyalty that doesn't need to be won with charm, but is guaranteed by billion-dollar contracts and the implicit threat of financial ruin if demands are not met. The lesson here is about engineering behavior through system design. Tim Cook shows us that the most lasting control comes not from volatile inspiration, but from relentless structure. He has built a cathedral of efficiency, where the prayer is execution and faith is loyalty to the process. It is a model of control that is both less personal and far more comprehensive than that of Jobs. The machine doesn't care about your feelings, only about your function. And by becoming an indispensable part of the machine, your loyalty becomes an unavoidable conclusion. While Steve Jobs possessed the charisma of the creator, the rebellious artist, Tim Cook developed a different and perhaps more potent form of charisma for Apple's current era, the charisma of the guardian. He does not position himself as the source of the flame, but as its most faithful protector. Every speech, every decision is framed not as his own vision, but as the continuation and protection of Jobs' legacy and Apple's core values. He has transformed himself into the high priest of the cult of Jobs, and this position grants him an almost unassailable moral authority. This guardian posture is an extremely effective legacy manipulation tactic. By constantly invoking the memory and standards of Steve Jobs, he creates an impossible standard of comparison for any dissenter. Opposing a decision by Tim Cook can easily be reframed as a betrayal of the principles that made Apple great. He uses the past as both a shield and a weapon, sanctifying his own strategies by linking them to the mythical figure of the founder. Loyalty to him merges with loyalty to the company's own history and identity. Cook's charisma comes not from a magnetic personality, but from a consistency and reliability that border on the absolute. In a volatile world, he represents stability. He is the rock upon which the trillion-dollar empire was solidified. People, both employees and investors, are not drawn to his explosive passion, but to his calm competence. He projects a security that is immensely charismatic in its own right. He promises not an unpredictable revolution, but perfect execution and continued prosperity, a much more seductive promise for a mature company. This guardian role also allows him to exercise strict control under the guise of preservation. When he vetoes an idea or fires an executive, it can be justified not as an act of personal power, but as a necessary measure to protect the soul of Apple. He becomes the arbiter of what is and what is not Apple. This authority to define The essence of the culture and the brand gives him immense power to shape the organization in his image, all while claiming to be merely serving a larger, pre-existing vision. Psychologically, we learn that charisma can take many forms. It's not just about flash and rhetoric. It's about embodying what the group values most. In the beginning, Apple valued rebellion. Today, as one of the most powerful corporations in the world, it values stability, responsibility, and the preservation of its status. Tim Cook perfectly embodies these new values. He teaches us that sometimes, the most charismatic leader is not the one who promises a radically new future, but the one who promises to zealously protect a glorious present and past. One of Tim Cook's most ingenious and dark control strategies is his masterful use of moral values, like privacy and sustainability, as management and marketing tools. He doesn't just sell products, he sells moral absolution. In a world where technology is increasingly seen as exploitative and harmful, Apple positions itself as an ethical sanctuary. Cook speaks with the conviction of an activist, declaring privacy a fundamental human right and committing the company to ambitious environmental goals. This is not just good corporate citizenship. It is a master psychological strategy. By doing this, he builds what is known in social psychology as a morally superior in-group. Apple employees are not just making phones. They are fighting for good, protecting user data from other greedy corporations, and saving the planet. This shared moral identity creates an incredibly strong bond of loyalty. Criticizing Apple internally or deciding to leave the company becomes psychologically more difficult, as it is not just a career move, but an apparent abandonment of a higher moral purpose. It is a golden cage, but its bars are made of virtue. This posture of moral superiority also functions as a powerful shield against external criticism. When Apple is criticized for its labor practices in China, its monopolistic power in the App Store, or its high prices, Cook can skillfully shift the focus to its credentials in privacy and the environment. He creates a culture war where Apple represents the side of good, and its critics are, by implication, allies of the evil forces that do not care about human values. It is a tactic that polarizes the debate and entrenches the loyalty of its customer and employee base. The obligation to align with these corporate values also serves as an internal control mechanism. Employees are expected not only to perform their tasks, but also to embody these values. This adds a layer of social surveillance and self-policing to the company culture. Any behavior or opinion that does not align with the company's public stance can be seen as a cultural dissonance, marking the individual as someone who doesn't fit. This ensures a high degree of ideological conformity, which is the foundation for unquestioning loyalty. The dark lesson here is about the weaponization of morality. Tim Cook demonstrates how values can be transformed into one of the most powerful tools of control and branding. He teaches us to be skeptical when a corporation positions itself as a moral beacon. We must always ask, does this moral compass serve to guide us or to cage us? Virtue, when used strategically, can create a loyalty so strong and an obedience so blind that no direct order or threat could ever match it. We are diving deep into the silent machinery of Tim Cook's control. If this analysis is opening your eyes to the subtle forms of power that govern the corporate world, then you have found your place. Click the like button to support our investigation, and if you haven't already, subscribe to The Truth, Dark Psychology. We want your opinion. What other corporate figure or silent leader do you think hides a manipulative mind? Let us know in the comments. Now let's continue dismantling this machine. Apple's legendary culture of secrecy, established by Jobs, has been perfected and systematized by Tim Cook, transforming it into a fundamental pillar of his control system. Secrecy at Apple is not just about protecting trade secrets. It's about controlling the narrative and, more importantly, controlling the employees. Information is power, and by compartmentalizing knowledge to an extreme degree, leadership ensures that no one, except the innermost circle, has the full picture of what is happening. Employees work on isolated projects, often without knowing what the final product will be, which renders them powerless to challenge the overall strategy. This culture of secrecy generates a form of loyalty based on fear. Apple is notoriously ruthless with leakers, employing internal security teams that investigate and fire anyone who breaks the code of silence. The threat of losing one's job, being publicly humiliated, and sued is a powerful deterrent that forces absolute compliance. Employees quickly learn that silence and discretion are not just company policies, but essential conditions for their professional survival. Loyalty, in this case, is fear disguised as professionalism. The isolation created by secrecy also prevents worker solidarity and organization. If engineers in one division cannot discuss their work with those in another, it becomes much harder to compare salaries, working conditions, or concerns about the company's direction. This deliberate atomization undermines the employee's ability to form a united front, keeping power firmly concentrated at the top of the hierarchy. It is a classic divide-and-conquer strategy, applied with surgical precision in the corporate environment. Beyond fear, secrecy also creates a sense of exclusivity and privilege that can be manipulated to ensure loyalty. Being part of a secret project at Apple, being one of the few to know a confidential piece of information, generates a feeling of importance and belonging. It is a psychological reward that the company grants in exchange for obedience. Employees feel they are part of something special and secret, and the last thing they want is to betray that trust and be cast out of this elite circle, thus losing their status and identity. The psychological lesson here is about how the control of information is the most fundamental form of power. Apple's culture of secrecy under Cook's management is not a quaint remnant of the Jobs era, but an active and calculated tool of control. It fosters fear, prevents organization, creates false feelings of exclusivity, and ensures that the flow of power is always unidirectional, from the top down. It shows us that what is not said in an organization is often more important and more controlling than what is openly communicated. Under Tim Cook's leadership, Apple became the richest company in human history, and this vast wealth is a psychological control tool that cannot be underestimated. The company is famous for its generous stock grants to employees, especially at higher levels. This strategy creates what is known as golden handcuffs. Employees are so well compensated, and their future wealth is so tied to the performance of Apple's stock, that it becomes financially irrational to leave, even if they are unhappy or disagree with the company's direction. This financial dependency creates a form of loyalty that is transactional and deeply cynical. The employee may not love the culture or believe in the vision, but the price of their disloyalty would be the loss of potentially millions of dollars. It is a form of large-scale operant conditioning. The desired behavior, staying with the company, working long hours, not causing trouble, is rewarded with vast financial gains. This effectively buys compliance and obedience, making any rebellious impulse or moral principle a luxury that is too expensive to afford. Wealth also creates a reality bubble and a profound confirmation bias. When your job makes you rich and the outside world celebrates your company's success, it is very difficult to believe that anything could be fundamentally wrong with the culture or strategy. Financial success becomes the ultimate validation that the methods, no matter how controlling or demanding, are correct. Employees get caught in a positive feedback loop where the success of the stock price justifies any personal sacrifice or ethical compromise, silencing critical internal voices. Furthermore, the structure of stock grants, which often vest over several years, is designed to ensure long-term loyalty. An employee must remain with the company for a set period to receive the full value of their shares. This means Apple is not just buying the employees' loyalty today, but for several years into the future. It is an invisible tether that keeps talent tied to the company, even when competitors or new opportunities arise, ensuring the stability and continuity of the machine. The dark lesson that emerges is about the relationship between money and power. Tim Cook, the master operator, understands that the most reliable loyalty, in the end, may not be emotional or ideological, but financial. By perfectly aligning the financial interests of his employees with those of the company, he has created the most effective talent retention machine in the world. This forces us to question the nature of loyalty in modern capitalism. Is it a genuine commitment, or simply the rational response to an irresistible incentive? Tim Cook's legacy will be that of one of the most financially successful CEOs of all time. He took the volatile and brilliant creation of an artist and turned it into a relentless and perfectly optimized profit machine. He built a system of control and loyalty so efficient and so subtle that it makes Jobs' reality distortion field look like a crude tool in comparison. The lesson is that stability, predictability, and flawless execution, while less glamorous, can generate more power and wealth than chaotic genius. However, the shadow of this legacy is the question of the psychological and cultural cost of this. Efficiency. Cook's machine is designed for optimization, not for revolution. The loyalty it demands is based on conformity, predictability, and adherence to a system. This raises a fundamental question. Can a culture so focused on control and efficiency truly sustain the think different spirit that originated it? Or is the loyalty machine, in its perfection, slowly suffocating the rebellious soul that allowed Apple to exist? Dark psychology teaches us that every system of control has a hidden side. Cook's system, based on calm, moral values, secrecy, and wealth, creates unprecedented stability. But it can also breed complacency, risk aversion, and a culture where it is safer to follow the process than to challenge it. The fear is no longer of the leader's wrath, but of being the gear that squeaks, the anomaly that disturbs the operational harmony. This is a quieter type of fear, but potentially more paralyzing. For true innovation, the contrast between Jobs and Cook offers the final lesson on the two faces of control. Jobs represented control by charisma and force of personality, a hot, volatile, and individual-centric control. Cook represents control by system and processa, cold, methodical, and diffuse control. Both are incredibly effective, but they produce very different cultures and psychological outcomes. Apple's journey under these two leaders is a case study on the evolution of power in the corporate world. Ultimately, Tim Cook's loyalty machine is his greatest triumph and his greatest risk. It shows us that it is possible to create an empire based on quiet, systematic, and sometimes purchased loyalty. But it warns us that operational perfection may come at a price. The true test of Cook's legacy will be whether Apple's next great revolution can be born from within his perfectly controlled machine, or if true innovation can now only come from the outside, from minds that have not yet been tamed by his relentless efficiency. The machine works in silence, but its control is absolute. The story of Tim Cook shows us that the most powerful forms of manipulation are often the most invisible. If you are determined to understand these hidden dynamics of power, join our community. Subscribe to The Truth, Dark Psychology. Turn on notifications so you never miss an investigation like this. And leave a comment below. Do you prefer the chaotic control of a visionary or the cold precision of an operator? Until the next video, where we will continue to expose the truth behind power.